Episode 521. Just as everyone was feeling lost, the branch leaders of the 7 major guilds on the 10th server all received a message from Lord Grimm.
Still hanging on? What's the point?
Exactly. What's the point? Upon receiving the news, the 7 branch heads didn't even bother getting angry. Instead, they all asked themselves the same question. After a moment of silent contemplation, all 7 of them came to the same realization. This stubborn insistence was utterly pointless. The original purpose of these guilds' actions was to kill Thousand City, to prevent the Happy Guild from forming a dungeon team that could threaten them. But what was the result? They couldn't kill Thousand City, and now they're living in constant fear of Happy's top players striking back. Now their only goal was to survive in Thousand Wave Lake and minimize their losses. Meanwhile, Happy was constantly hitting them, and their dungeon team would be seamlessly integrated into Thousand City in 5 days, with the added bonus of Monday. What was the point of all that running around for the guilds? If they'd just done nothing, they could be leveling in peace right now. Instead, they insisted on making trouble for themselves, turning a perfectly good leveling zone into a minefield. Now their leveling efficiency was being dragged down, and they had absolutely no ability to obstruct Happy's formation of a dungeon team. Their efforts were no longer about gaining any advantage, but about avoiding loss. And these losses, they clearly couldn't avoid them entirely. By the end of the day, the luck was distributed unevenly among the guilds. Some might have been fuming over their losses, while others could afford a quiet chuckle. But this state of affairs wouldn't end in a single day. It could last 3 days, 5, 10, or even half a month. This state of affairs would only end once they leveled up enough to leave the Thousand Waves Lake leveling area. They could make that choice. They could retreat to the lower-level Sin City, or advance to the next higher-leveling zone past Thousand Wave Lake, Boulder Ridge. But these veterans chose to level at Thousand Wave Lake precisely because it was the most efficient grinding spot. That concession alone is already a loss. They now had 3 paths before them. First, concede the leveling grounds. Move to zones with efficiency either lower or higher than Thousand Wave Lake, which would slow down their character's progression. Second, negotiate with Lord Grimm. They could, as before, trade materials for peace, securing their other interests at the cost of those resources. Third, maintain the status quo. Continue to bear the pressure and the risk, hiding in Thousand Wave Lake and leveling up while avoiding Lord Grimm and his crew. And what consequences this choice would ultimately bring was completely unknowable. It was a gamble on pure luck. If you're talking about the Misty Rain Guild, they've already lost a fortune today. But if you look at it from the Royal Style Guild's perspective, this day was indeed a much more economical choice compared to the first or second options. The leaders of the 7 guilds were once again caught in a dilemma. The same problem, the same dilemma. After careful consideration, all 7 guild leaders decisively ruled out the third option. They simply couldn't afford to take that risk. On top of their existing pressures, a harsh reality now stared them down. If any of their 7 guilds were to defect to the other side, they'd likely pull the same trick as Blue Brook and Tyrannical Ambition, instantly turning their guns to loot the burning house. Don't be fooled by their righteous indignation and their scorn for Blue Brook Pavilion and Tyrannical Ambition. If any of them found themselves in the same position, they'd turn on their allies faster than a rabbit. Especially in a virtual environment like the internet, there's not even a hint of shame. There are no eternal friends, only eternal interests. That phrase perfectly described the relationship between these club guilds. No guild dared to keep up this stalemate in Thousand Wave Lake, considering the possibility that if they maintained the status quo while others defected, it would create even greater pressure. The question then became one of retreat and compromise. To yield means leaving the Thousand Wave Lake leveling zone. To compromise means paying Lord Grimm materials for peace. On one side you lose experience, on the other you lose materials. You can't have your cake and eat it too, but from an emotional standpoint, compromise is undoubtedly the more galling option. Guild leaders always put their interests first, but they can't afford to ignore their members' feelings either. And at this moment, the fact that Lord Grimm was the great god Ye Chu immediately gave them some psychological comfort. Sometimes, the members of the 7 guilds couldn't even tell if facing the great god was a blessing or a curse. Having firmly ruled out the third option, the question of whether to retreat or compromise was no longer about weighing pros and cons. It came down to each guild's mood and how to placate them. The 7 major guilds knew that dragging things out was pointless, and soon they all made their decisions. On Ye Chu's side, he soon received messages from 5 of the 7 guilds. They were tentatively asking what they should do if they didn't want to proceed like this. Ye Chu didn't say a word. He just calmly sent the same materials list out 5 times in a row. The 5 guild leaders who received the list had braced themselves for this, but seeing it in black and white still made them grit their teeth. Compared to the initial quote, the list of materials had clearly increased again. The 5 guilds could only accept this, call it profiteering, call it a change in circumstances. They weren't entirely unprepared for the price hike at this point. Though the 5 guilds were seething inside, no one voiced any further objections. Their replies were a uniform chorus of confirmation. After that, the 2 sides agreed on a meeting spot for the trade. The list of materials was extensive, so Ye Chu took a moment to clear out his inventory. The meeting spot was in a safe zone within the main city, so there wasn't much need to worry about it being a trap. Upon arriving, I saw that the 5 player characters, each bearing the name of one of the 5 guilds, were already present. Of course, they were all among the top 100 on the level rankings. Though the day had been a rough one for these guilds, with rankings on the level leaderboard swapping all over the place, the overall list of top players hadn't actually changed. But if this keeps up, no one can say for sure whether some new faces might just break into the top 100 of the level rankings.